Okay, this is vlog number 250, and I'm gonna read some tweets from my friend Jean Yang, who is a professor at Carnegie Mellon University and is also now an entrepreneur in Silicon Valley, starting her own company. And this is a tweet she wrote earlier this week, and its message just stuck with me so much that I've been thinking about it again and again over the past few days. I'm just gonna read it out for you, and I'll also link to it. So she says, been having many conversations with people in their 20s about the paralysis that can arise from having too many life choices. My advice? Commit to something and commit hard. Doesn't matter if you switch later, it's easy to prove yourself if you had to do it once before. And then she followed up with two follow-up tweets. So she said, then she followed up, she said, the quarter life crisis, which is around, 25 years old or so, can go on for quite a while, and you don't want to come out having little show for your self-exploration. You learn just as much, if not more, about whether you like something by actually doing it, rather than thinking about if you might like it. And her final in her three-part tweet is, at one point in my mid-20s, a friend observed that we were nearing the end of getting opportunities because of our potential and would soon be evaluated on what we've actually done. This was a real turning point in my thinking on how much space I should take to find myself. So there's a lot to unpack here in these three tweets here by Jean. And I've also had conversations with people in their early 20s, both undergraduate students and graduate students, and also junior colleagues who are earlier on in their careers. And this is like the big question, I think, for people who've had the good fortune of perhaps getting a good education, of being able to get good first jobs, of just having options in their professional and their personal lives, right? So this is really for people who are in a fortunate position to have many options available. And then there's this paralysis problem, this choice paralysis problem of, should I go down path A or path B or path C? I have multiple interests, I have multiple sets of skills. What should I do? Should I dabble in this for a bit and then that and this other thing? Or should I try to go down one path or the other? What if I spend all my energy going down one path only to find this is not really for me, and then would I have wasted a bunch of time? And I see my friends who are going down another path that they seem to be quote unquote more ahead in their lives or careers than I am, and I feel like I'm falling behind, blah, blah, blah. So, you either are in the target audience and you know what I mean exactly, or you're not, and in which case you could, shut off this video and go watch cat videos or dog videos on YouTube. But assuming you're in this target audience of people, say, in their 20s, just finishing college, finishing graduate school, just about to start their careers, thinking about what path they want to take, I think this series of tweets is right on, and it resonated with me a lot. And I want to add a bit of my kind of personal take on this, to kind of give a little bit about my personal experiences. And it's funny. I think reflecting on the series of tweets is really interesting to me, because I have never had that problem of, wanting to explore too widely and then not committing and such. Because, maybe it was growing up in an immigrant household where my parents really emphasized just committing and not worrying about too much about the big picture or about whether you found your true identity or purpose. It's funny because when I was growing up, they would cite a lot of their friends or their friends' kids and say, this is a very quote unquote American or Western sort of luxury to be, going to find yourself and exploring all these different options and such. And they didn't force me to go down a certain profession or whatever, but they were always of this mindset of action over anything else, of whatever you start doing, do a really, 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 really darn good job at it and commit hard to it, in Jean's words, and just try to be the best at it and work at it. And then if you find out that it's not for you, or something else comes along that's better, then you pivot, right? You pivot and you go for that next thing. So I've always grown up with that sort of mentality. I don't want to say it's exclusively an quote unquote immigrant mentality, but it definitely seems to be associated with immigrant households that I've known growing up. And of course, there's a flip side to this, right? Like, you don't want to be, say, pressured by your parents into going down a path, a sort of education, a college major, a career path that's totally not for you, right? Like, you don't want to be shoved down a path that you think is totally out of alignment with your values and skills and your interests. So I think there is, I think, college and your early 20s is a time to explore. But I think that the pendulum can really swing too far the other way. I see students and junior colleagues perhaps wanting to explore a bit too much and not being willing to commit down one path for any time. And I think Gene's insights are just right on, is that like, the only way to really start getting good at something and finding out whether that thing is for you is just to commit. And in her words, my advice, commit to something and commit hard. And I think that's right on, because, only by going down a certain path can you find out what it's really like, right? Like, you can read all about it. You can read blog posts, you can watch YouTube videos, you can talk to colleagues, talk to friends about, oh, what is it like to do X? But until you actually go down that path, you really don't know what it's like. I know this is like such a cliche. I mean, it sounds extremely, extremely cliched, but it is true. The other part of this I want to add is the fact that, like, what Gene says in her words is, it's easier to prove yourself if you've had to do it once before. And my interpretation of that is that even if you go into a field that's different than what you started with, you know what it's like to get to that level of mastery or expertise. Being able to commit to something earlier on in your life is good, not just because of what, not necessarily because that's the thing you're going to be doing for the rest of your life, but because you will know what it's like to get really, really good at something. And I think that's, one of the, if I had to broadly categorize, people I know into two categories very, very roughly, it's like there's a category of people who have who know what it takes to get really, really good at something. And then there's a category of people who don't really know what that takes. That they just kind of do stuff kind of half-heartedly. They just kind of go with the flow and just like do whatever. And that's perfectly fine. But then there's a category of people I know who really know what it takes to be an expert at something, to be world-class at something. And I think that being able to do that means that if you switch to something later on in your life, which you probably will do, that you know how it takes the amount of effort and dedication and resourcefulness and tenacity it takes to do that in a new field. And I think that's why it's really important to be able to commit to something early on. And in the academic sense, that, in that context, that means, committing to a project that you're doing, committing to a certain major, committing to a certain, line of work. All the while knowing that it's okay if you do it for a few years and then you quit and you do something else. That's perfectly fine. We're not saying that you have to stick into this field or the subfield or the sub-subfield for the rest of your life. The world changes so fast around you. You change, the people around you change. But just as a very idea of being willing to dive in and commit and experiencing all the ups and downs with it, that will just make it so that you will know how to do that again if you need to later in your life. I'm gonna end a bit by talking about this last part of her tweet, which is, I'm gonna repeat again, is at one point in my mid-20s, a friend observed that we were nearing the end of getting opportunities because of our potential and would soon be evaluated on what we've actually done. This was a real turning point in my thinking on how much space I should take to find myself. And, I'm 35 now, so I'm, a decade or a decade and a half above people in their, squarely in their 20s. And I can tell you that's absolutely true. That, as much as it's something that is maybe hard to bring up with people, or maybe awkward to bring up, is that this age thing really is a high order bit for a lot of people, in the sense of, when you are young and you are, say, in your, early 20s or mid 20s, people tend to give you the benefit of the doubt and they say, oh, you're right out of school. You're a new hire. We're going to give you a lot of opportunities and benefit of the doubt because you're still learning. You're still growing. Oh, I remember what it was like back when I was, in college or in graduate school or fresh out of my first job. You get opportunities based on potential, the P word, potential. But as you age, as you get past your 20s and well into your 30s, like myself, I totally see this with myself, my colleagues. You are judged more and more by what you have already done and what you can do currently, rather than the potential of what you could possibly do in the future. So again, what Gene says is that a friend observed that we were nearing the end of getting opportunities because of our potential and would soon be evaluated on what we've actually done. So there is a ticking clock throughout your 20s that, as the years go by, the clock ticks, the clock really ticks by. And I would kind of urge you to have a bit of a sense of urgency. Again, I don't want, I'm not saying that you should just go for the first thing that comes to mind and then just commit to that and never switch and stubbornly just stick with a certain path. But I think that, it is important to keep in the back of your head that as you get older, in terms of years of experience on your job and your career path, people are not as willing to give you the benefit of the doubt based on potential anymore. And that's, again, why it's important to be willing to commit to something and to become an expert at something, even if you're going to be able to switch later on. And there's a bunch of follow-up tweets that other people have written to respond to Gene's tweet and to add more nuance and stuff. And, obviously, my insights are only a fraction of it, but I think this is a really important topic. I don't claim to have the answer to that, but I think that it's a question that everybody needs to address, and you have a limited amount of time to address that. Okay, until next time.